So let's see. So what do we have planned for us for today? My name is Dalit. I work with the American Friends Service Committee. And we're going to introduce some of you for the first time, some of you for the millionth time, to our online resource, which is called the Investigate Investment Screening Tool, and to some of our research on the prison industrial complex and incarceration industry. We'll have several parts of this webinar. We're planning for an hour and a half. I hope you can stay with us for that long. The first part will be just introduction to our research and to our mapping of this industry and what you can find on the website. Then we'll move to some specific corporate targets and what people can do in the way of boycott or divestment, or how to measure your prison footprint, which is another way of saying what are you invested in. And last, we will talk about divestment and existing divestment campaigns around us. I want to kind of encourage people, if you want to just open your chat now. Diana showed you how to do that, so you just go on the top of your screen where the chat square is hiding, and you can chat everybody. Just pick everybody as who to send it to, and just chat your name and your affiliation, if it is an organization or a group that you are working with. This way we can all see who is on the call. Again, questions, just chat privately to Elisa questions. It's on the top of that list of who to send it to, and she will arrange them for us. And during the Q&A, which is the last half an hour of the call, we will go over your questions and try and answer them to the best of our ability. So let's see if people are already chatting in anything. Yay, so we see Marie, Dominique, Eva. This is great. This way we can see where people are from. We have Richard from the University of Michigan. And we have Jordan, our good friend. Valerie, fabulous. Welcome, everybody. So you can continue to do that. I want us to all see each other and see who is here. That will be fabulous. And I will, meanwhile, pass the ball to my colleague from Arizona, Caroline Isaacs, and she will start our presentation.
Cool. Hello. Do I have the ball? I have the ball. So Diana, you can ignore that text I just sent you. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to hear about this incredible and evolving tool that we are working on creating and really excited to share with everyone. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the genesis of this in particular. So we're really building on the work of a lot of people in terms of pushing back against the for-profit prison industry, folks like in the Enlace, the UMC, others who have started boycott and divestment campaigns and have, taken this economic activism route to question and challenge the power of this particular industry. And so we at AFSC have been working on those kinds of issues here in Arizona. In particular, we are always battling the for-profit prison industry because it is a huge driver of mass incarceration in our corner of the world. And as part of our work on that, we really started to move toward a new kind of approach to us anyway, which is corporate research. Instead of just kind of like, reading the news about the terrible things that for-profit prison companies are doing and then publicizing it, which is fun, and we love to do that. But we also realized that we had to think like a corporation in order to really understand the industry and be better at our jobs of trying to trip it up. So in really doing the corporate research, finding out about the corporations, how they think, what they view their next source of profits as being, that actually gives us a huge strategic advantage as activists to, head them off at the pass, as we say here in the Old West, right? If you can figure out what their next move might be and start to problematize and undermine that, then, essentially we can deprive this industry of oxygen is the hope, and cut off new sources of profit for them, which could ultimately be crippling. I mean, they're already reeling from the prison downsizing and the movement to end mass incarceration in this country, right? They are canceling contracts, they're losing contracts, states are not building prisons at the rate that they once were. The problem, of course, is that these corporations are extremely adept. They do their economic homework, and they figured out a long time ago where this industry was going, and so they're really kind of selling what states are buying, which is now rehabilitation and alternatives to incarceration. So this is a movement that we've dubbed the treatment industrial complex, and it was really our work in looking at the corporate research that led us to figure this out, that this is where they're headed, and part of that is by looking at their mergers and acquisitions. So it's been a really fascinating process for us and extremely useful as an activist tool. And so we wanted to share this with you because it's really, as far as we know, it's the first of its kind in terms of the scope of trying to actually map as much of the prison industry as we can, and it's still incomplete, it's still evolving. So I am now going to hopefully share my screen with you so we can actually go walking through this thing. So this is the Investigate website. Ta-da! That's your home page right there. And we have a couple of different screens. First one that pops up is the prison industry. So what you get when you click on that is, basically the initial version of this map. So we start off with, the page that just describes the prison industry. Then you're going to get a list of the companies that we are recommending for divestment, and you can click on any of those to get the full deets. But as you scroll down, this is where we tried to really do this mapping piece of what is the full spectrum of profiteering from mass incarceration, right? So facility management is probably the most familiar one that we've all heard of. Corrections Corporation of America, GEO Group, they run prisons, right? So there they are. You can get a full description if you click on the Read More. And then you're going to get in this gray box a list of pretty much the major players that we've been able to identify. The first four, of course, are the biggies, and those, as you see, if they are in green, those are targets for divestment. But we also, in this map, want to tell you about the privately held companies that are still making buku bucks off of this industry, but are not going to be targets for divestment because they're not publicly traded. But we think we should still know who they are. So, you've got Management and Training Corporation, Emerald, LaSalle, and CEC, some of the smaller fish. Moving down, also in the kind of facility management piece is youth detention and quote-unquote treatment. And there are a bunch of companies involved there. You can, if you hit this Read More button, I'll just show you so you get to see what pops up. You get kind of our index that describes kind of what we're observing, what we know about the industry, a few links to other resources that may be useful, and then we will remind you of which companies we are targeting for divestment. Moving on, you've got prison food, commissary, and other goods. This one is booming. This has really been a pretty fascinating effort on my part in terms of just discovering the multitude of companies and the incredible range of stuff that they make, right? Because like everything in a prison is an opportunity for profit, right? The plastic tray that the food is on, the food on the tray, the service of cleaning and cooking and everything else, all of that can be outsourced and subcontracted out. Prison phone services. There's actually been a fair amount of attention paid recently, fortunately, to the issue of price gouging, basically by these for-profit companies that get these very lucrative contracts with prisons and detention centers and jails to allow people to make phone calls to their loved ones. And you see here that there are actually some really interesting players in that field, including CenturyLink, which may be your phone provider. But we also try, again, to go into the full scope of the major players in that industry, some of which you may never have heard of, just to kind of give you an idea of who's out there. A very similar piece is the video visitation, right? That's another booming industry. Very predatory because in some cases these companies are insisting that the jails or facilities remove face-to-face visitation and instead go only to video visitation in order to increase their profits. So that's a good segment to keep an eye on. Medical and mental health services, you know, we've heard a lot. Certainly in Arizona, we're familiar with these guys, Corizon, Wexford, some of these corporations that get subcontracted out to provide the medical care in your prisons and jails. Transportation is a big one, you know, taking those prisoners from one place to another to court and back and everything else. And community corrections. This is a big focus of our work on the treatment industrial complex because this is one of the places where we're really observing a lot of movement on the part of the for-profit prison corporations, right? So again, as states now are talking about evidence-based practices in corrections, trying to reduce recidivism, actually addressing root causes of crime, ironically, the same companies that were all too happy to just lock people up and warehouse them are now rebranding themselves as providing these wonderful services. And so it's been a really interesting process of kind of watching the mergers and acquisitions in the field around these issues. So I'm going to walk you through one of them, and that's our friends at Geo Group of Boca Raton, Florida. So here, again, you get all the deets on the corporation. You get a little picture of their lovely logo and their stock symbols, a description of, you know, how much money they made last year and what they made it from doing. But if you come down to here, you notice that both GEO and CCA in 2013 converted to a REIT, a real estate investment trust, right? That's like a hotel. That's like saying for tax purposes, all we do is have properties, right? And that means that they essentially, you know, pay no income taxes now because they have reconfigured themselves as REITs. And they have to distribute at least 90% of their income to shareholders in the form of dividends, which the shareholders like very much. What was interesting, though, in this transition is that previously GEO had this in-house health subsidiary called GeoCare. No, really, GeoCare, that was providing the medical care. They had to cut that loose to become an REIT, right? So that became then its own company, Correct Care Solutions. Then they repurposed this GeoCare brand within GEO, and that's now where they house their juvenile detention, electronic monitoring, and their reentry programs, right? So knowing, you know, who's who and also the history of some of these companies is really helpful for those of us who are engaged in economic activism and other forms of, you know, railing against the prison industrial complex, because you have to know who they are now and who they used to be in order to really have a full idea of the company that you're dealing with and choose a good target for your campaigns. And that's been something that's been just really useful for us and very important. So going back to the map, next up is the private probation industry, which is particularly disgusting. This has also been getting some press recently in terms of, basically a return to the new debtors' prisons. This is probation. This is misdemeanor probation in most cases, right? So these are just people who can't pay a traffic ticket. They get placed on this quote-unquote probation with a for-profit company and end up paying that company probably 10 times over what they actually owed on the original ticket. They've been faced with lawsuits from our friends at the Southern Center for Human Rights and other places. So it's a really interesting piece of the industry to keep an eye on. And then one of the last and probably most burgeoning pieces of this industry now is supervision and surveillance, right? So electronic monitoring is all the rage as states are trying to maintain the number of people embroiled in the prison system, but to do it cheaper, right? And so these companies now are moving into GPS ankle bracelet monitoring and mobile breathalyzer tests and other forms of supervision and surveillance that really allows the mass incarceration to actually continue to grow because you can have more people on these lesser forms of supervision. It's a really interesting piece of the puzzle to be keeping an eye on, and it's certainly something that we've been monitoring very closely. So again, this has been a really helpful tool for us in terms of keeping track of where these companies are going so that we can be doing good targeting in terms of our campaigns. And I want to give you one more quick example because I do have time, right? And that's going back to this issue of community corrections, right? So the big two, CCA and GEO Group, have both been getting squeezed by the movement to decarcerate, right? And so their movement now into reentry and quote-unquote community corrections has been very aggressive. So one of the really interesting pieces is to look at some of the mergers that have already happened. So you've got CCA, right? And if you click on them, you get all the history, how much money they're making, that they have a transportation subsidiary, right, that's listed under the transportation piece, the largest detainee prisoner transportation company in the U.S. We talk about their REIT conversion as well. And some of their greatest hits in terms of scandals and abuses and lawsuits. But if you scroll down the bottom here, you notice that CCA in 2015 acquired Avalon. And, okay, you have to believe me now, we knew they were going to do this. We knew it. And then they did, because we've been tracking this industry. And Avalon was one of the bigger fish in terms of running community corrections programs, reentry centers, day reporting centers, and the like. So it was a perfect target for CCA to just buy the company outright because they have tons of cash and they can do that. And when they do that, they absorb all of the contracts that Avalon already had. So they don't have to go out and earn these contracts with the various communities to be able to run their reentry centers. They just get to bring them on board in one fell swoop. Interestingly enough, you can also look to see that, and we actually haven't updated this because it's all moving so fast, but also very recently, CCA bought 4 facilities from CEC. Let me find those guys. Community education centers. Now, because they're privately held, we don't have a whole profile on them, but CEC is huge. They run a bunch of reentry centers in New Jersey, right? And I would put some money down that probably pretty soon CCA or GEO is going to buy the rest of that company and take on all the rest of their holdings. So you know, you heard it here first, folks. So check back on our awesome website and you'll see if it happened. But also this is, you know, again, to sort of illustrate how useful this has been for us to say, like, okay, if we know where these companies are going to go, then that gives us something of a strategic advantage to start kind of putting our resources into the right place to challenge and question that. So if you know that there's a company that is particularly evil, you can go do the homework on them, find out if they have a local office in your area that would make a good target for a protest or a letter writing campaign or some such. We recently discovered that there is a really horrific company called Libre by Nexus. Libre, no lie, and they're actually, they broker bonds to get immigrants out of detention. But the way that they do it is by slapping an ankle bracelet monitor on said immigrant and making them pay for it, like $420 a month. You know, it's an incredibly predatory practice for people who are desperate to get themselves out of detention. And they happen to be headquartered, not headquartered, but they do have an office in Phoenix. And so that gives us a great way to locally bring the focus onto a larger predatory practice in terms of mass incarceration, make it very real, give people something concrete to do, and at the same time, you know, challenge the entire industry and illustrate the immorality and the, you know, incredible waste of tax dollars. If you're in Arizona, that's the more important argument. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say, and of course, you know, we'll be doing questions pretty soon. So now I have to figure out how to get out of here. Where's my thing? All right, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to give the ball back to Dalit. Where are you, Dalit?
I think I already took it from you.
Did you? Oh, good. She's quick on the ball. That's Dalit. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I will also share my screen with you. Not my email, though. That's not, no. So Caroline has already showed us some of the things you can do with the website. And also, I want to talk about things that people can do about these companies and just start the conversation about that. So Caroline told us about the phone companies and how they profit from the captive market of providing phone services or video services to prisons. One of them is CenturyLink. And CenturyLink is a very interesting company because, of course, some of us might have other dealings with CenturyLink. Companies or institutions that we work with, including individuals like ourselves, we might have a contract for the internet services or phone services with CenturyLink. This is a great opportunity because unlike with CCA or GEO Group, we can actually do something about it. So one thing is to decide for yourself individually, do you want to have a contract with CenturyLink? Do you want them to provide your internet service or not? They might not really care about you as an individual that much, but organizing collectively can have an impact. So this is an interesting angle. What to do with a huge corporation that has some business within the prison industry, and how to organize effectively what we want from them, really. So one thing is to try and engage with the company and try and get them to change the policy. For example, stop pushing for an end to face-to-face visitation, or take down their prices for phone calls. Another thing, and another idea on an industry level, is to put pressure on such companies to step away from prison business altogether. And the idea is that they have enough other business. And when you do that, and if you are successful in doing that, at least in one or two big companies, you manage to also isolate this entire industry, portray it as a toxic industry for business, help other companies think twice before they step into it, help reduce the profit in this industry thanks to that, and most importantly, help expose this industry as a whole and maybe curb its political power. This all comes from this understanding that we have and the analysis for many years that this industry has a huge political influence, that they use the lobbying in order to expand mass incarceration and get more money. So if we manage to tarnish the good reputation of this industry, just like we've done with other industries in the past, think tobacco, for example, then there is a good chance that we will be able to curb its political power and its ability to continue and expand and maybe lobby for, I don't know, bed quotas or less regulation over the rights of prisoners and so on and so forth. That's the idea. Another such company would be Aramark, which is a food service contractor. This was very successful in the past, where students in different campuses around the country have actually decided to boycott Aramark and protest against food services on campus by Aramark. They didn't focus only on prison issues. It was just one of the issues they focused on, but this can make a good campaign target. But I really want to focus on my favorite two targets. So I'm kind of hopping to my #1 favorite, which is G4S. This is a British-Danish company. If you haven't heard about it, good for you. It's the largest security services company in the world. And it's one of the largest companies in the world altogether. It's the second largest employer, private employer in the world. And in many places they try to replace policing and prisons. And so they take over the state in many places around the world in doing private state business. We have a very extensive profile about them because we have been investigating them for a long time for different reasons, and see horrible abuses in prisons that they manage in South Africa in the past, labor violations, involvement in the Israeli occupation. So we have a very extensive and sordid story about them here in the profile. But if you scroll down in any one of those profiles, you will get to my favorite part, the economic activism highlights part, where we try to record very, very carefully and keep up to date all the different victories that we have in campaigns around the world. So this is a good tool in order to convince a group to take on such a campaign. It's also good in convincing a church or institution you work with to divest from the company, because you can show them how many others have already divested from this company. It's a good tool to convince a store not to sell products from that company, or, for example, as you can see here, the UN office has decided to drop all contracts with G4S, so maybe dropping contracts with that company. G4S has lost a lot of companies over their violations of human rights around the world, and that is a boycott campaign. It's not boycott on the individual level, it's institutional boycott. And the company does listen to that. This is a big hindrance for them getting big public, high-profile contracts in states where human rights are being respected. So this has a direct impact on the way the company thinks of its future income, or in the way the company calculates the risk they have, what they call their human rights risk, and as it evolves. So even if we don't cost them a lot of money directly, the risk that we develop for them, the controversy risk, the human rights risk, the risk to future contracting, has an effect on their decision-making processes, which will make them more amenable and open for engagement and talking to human rights groups about conditions of prisons or juvenile detention halls that they manage at the moment. It might make them more inclined to step away from that business. G4S has just announced in March that they were going to sell all of their juvenile detention halls business in the UK and in the US. They haven't done so yet, but they have announced that they would, which is a good sign. And as we said, as companies step away from this business, it doesn't necessarily mean that this business will disappear. You know, another company will obviously buy it from them, but it does mean that that business becomes less powerful politically and less profitable in the long run. Another such great target that I want to advocate for is 3M. I actually have prepared a great slide about 3M, so I'm hoping you should hear it is. Yeah, 3M. So 3M does everything, and I'm sure if you're sitting in an office right now, you're surrounded by 3M products. If you're sitting at home, you're also surrounded by 3M products. They make Post-its, they make Scotch-Brite, Scotch tape, all of these things that you use all the time. They also make all sorts of interesting military things like shielding materials for the Apache helicopters. And they also have an interesting involvement, or not so fun involvement, with the prison industry through their work with UNICOR, which is the Federal Prison Labor Program, and through their work in providing UNICOR with raw materials and in also lobbying to increase that work, lobbying to support UNICOR and lobbying to, for example, change legislation in some states so they will replace their license plates more often because they make money off license plate production. It's kind of interesting to see. This is a good target because we buy their products, therefore they are sensitive to pressure on their branding, and because also their complicity in the prison industry doesn't seem to be very central to their sales. So maybe it will be easy to get them to step away from it. One thing that they have done recently was to buy an Israeli firm, a big Israeli firm, which is called Electronic Monitoring, 3M Electronic Monitoring now. And now they're one of the most dominant firms in the world in electronic monitoring and ankle bracelets. So the question is, do they have to do that? Do they have to sell these technologies all around the world? You can see some here about what 3M Electronic Monitoring is doing all around the world, including in prisons in this country, and providing tracking systems to inside prisons, so people will be seen and viewed anywhere they are, and also as alternative to incarceration. It's a way to highlight the ills of this industry, of the electronic monitoring industry, and get to a very wide audience because many people use these products. But it's also a way to get 3M to step away from that business. So I think it's kind of a promising campaign that was never taken up yet. Next, I want to show you the main business of our tool, which is actually scanning or looking for your prison industry footprint. The idea here is that maybe you have your own investments in your pension fund investment. Maybe you're associated with an institution like a school or a church or a university that has investments. Maybe you are working with others to look at your joint pension fund. Our own pension fund in the AFSC is managed by TIA-CREF. So what I did was just to download their annual report of holdings, and you can do that from the website of whoever manages your investments. And this is a big file. It's usually a PDF. This one has, I don't know, 150 pages. I don't want to read it all, but this tool can do it for you. You can just go to your computer, find that file after you have already downloaded it. Here it is, TIA-CREF, and upload it to the tool. You have to wait because things always take time, especially, you know, worthy things like that. And then you can scan this file to see what is your prison footprint. Right now we have two different topics covered by this tool. We might have more in the future. One is Israel-Palestine, human rights violations in Israel-Palestine, and the other is the prison industry as was described by Caroline. So you can pick both, or you can just pick one of them and then hit the button to scan. I'm going to do a little cheat because nobody wants to see the circle of doom. But I've already ran this scan. And you can see here that many companies came up with this scan. This is what TIACREF is invested in. We have 3M, CenturyLink, G4S, and so on. But the file I uploaded was their annual report. It included all of their funds. So if I go to see where is the fund I'm most interested in, the one I was most interested in is their Social Choice Fund. The Social Choice Fund is the one that they actually screen for human rights violations, is the one that is supposed to be clean of all sorts of bad human rights violators. So this one is on pages 50 to 51. And after that, they have another fund that is their Social Choice, which is also fossil-free. So fossil fuel-free fund. It's even better. You know, it's a really good conscience kind of fund. This is on pages 52, 53. So I can just focus on a range of pages here by the tool and put in 50 to 53. And that shows me what you can find on these pages. You see, it was almost instantaneous, which is kind of fun. And what came up is 3M. So 3M is considered a socially responsible company, and it's considered very good on its human rights record. It's on their portfolio here. And it is still a company we want to highlight for their complicity in electronic monitoring, in the military industries, and with prison labor. You can even click here on the right on View All Occurrences, or click here under the company name, View All 3 Occurrences. And if you click on it, you can see the actual document. It is transformed into a text document, but this way you can actually see the content. Again, if I go to page 50, which is where my fund is listed, this is the annual report for the Social Choice Equity Fund. Those of you who can see the screen, you can make it full screen, you can see the whole detail. And I scroll down and I can see 3M and I can see how much money they have in it, which is like $24 million, really? Anyhow, and it's a lot of money. And also come up here, there is a little index where all the companies found on this document are highlighted, and you can actually click to see the next occurrence of 3M, which is on the next page in the Social Choice Low Carbon Equity Fund. So this is how you can actually see what you are invested in and measure your prison footprint. The last thing I wanted to show you is really about divestment. As we saw in this scan, we saw that 3M came up. Maybe I'll go to the company profile. This is a profile for 3M. But we don't have any highlight here that says, please divest from this company. Unlike G4S, under the name of the company G4S, and whenever G4S will come up in a scan, you will see this exclamation mark. This company has been targeted for divestment. So I wanted to say a couple of words about that distinction and how it came about and how we make that distinction. If you go back to the home page of our tool, under our screens, you can see our divestment list. And when you click on that, you will see an explanation of what do we recommend for divestment and why. And this is work in progress. This is a new screen. We just actually published this new information this last November. And we had to make some adjustments and figure out what is a good target for divestment. Divestment usually takes into account two things. First of all is the extent of the involvement of the company and how severe are the violations that they are involved in. And the other thing is, are there other things for people to do? Divestment is just a tool. Is it an effective tool in this case? Is it something that is better than other choices? So we tried to summarize it here in our policy for American Friends Service Committee. Any company that owns, operates, or manages prisons anywhere, and no matter what is the extent of their investment in that industry, is targeted for divestment by us, and we recommend divestment from these companies. Then companies whose primary business is in the for-profit prison industry are also targeted for divestment. Obviously, these companies are not going to step away from that business, So why invest in them and why profit from that involvement? This is not ethical in our eyes. And the third category is companies that prove to be unresponsive to public and investor pressure. And this has to be measured over time. So we are giving them the benefit of the doubt, but we are continuously trying to monitor what is the extent of engagement by others and us with these companies, and do we think that they will step away from this business, yes or no. Still, our divestment recommendation is just a recommendation. The real recommendation by publishing this tool is for everybody to take some sort of action whenever they think they can do it. So if you think you can boycott these companies, if you can think you can engage with others to organize any kind of protest action, if you can just publicize or expose their actions. If you are a shareholder and you do not want to sell your stock, that's fine, but maybe use that proactively in order to vote on your proxies, in order to engage with the company as a shareholder. Do whatever you can. We want these companies to step away from this business because it's a harmful business to begin with, but also because their involvement in this business as profiteers is harmful. It helps promote that business and expand it. So I think this is all I wanted to cover. Let me just say a couple of words more about where we're taking this in the future. This is work in progress, okay, this website. And we need your feedback as to what works for you and how and where do you want, what do you want to see that you don't see, etc. But also the research itself is work in progress. There are things that are still being investigated and researched by us, and we hope that in the next few months we will continue updating everything as well as adding to the tool. For example, we are working on prison labor issues, not as a full mapping of all the use of prison labor, that's way beyond our capacity, but as trying to analyze and explain how this works in different levels, in the local level, in the state level, in the federal level. We're also working on the financial services sector, companies that provide prisons with credit lines and banking services, companies that provide prisons and prisoners with financial services such as release cards and credit cards and make profit off those services. And we are also looking in the future to expand that into the prison construction business and so on. It's slow work, and it's also slow because we want to keep things as up-to-date as we can. So if you find anything that is missing or that is not up-to-date, we really appreciate if you can send us that information. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen and I will figure out how to pass the ball to Jamie Trinkle of Enlace, who will tell us a little more about Enlace's work around divestment and the companies that they have been targeting. Now let me see how I can do that.
I think I just stole it from you, Dalit. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Trinkle. I work with Enlace. We are the convening organization of the prison divestment campaign, which started in 2011 in response to some of CCA's horrible lobbying and drafting of legislation in Arizona. They were behind SB 1070, and from there we realized we really needed to be tracking the private prison industry to, one, take on mass incarceration and immigration enforcement at once with a solid analysis of how they're parallel systems of control, and also recognizing that there's a lot of corporate power involved at different levels of government in pushing for mass incarceration and immigration enforcement. And if we can tackle that, then we are taking on one significant driver of those two systems at once. So I want to talk a little bit more about the financial sector, which will be coming into added to the Investigate website. The Million Shares Club are financial services industry groups that own over 1 million shares of Corrections Corporation of America stock and Geo Group stock combined. And we see the way that they actually work in tandem with the private prison industry to lobby for and to extend credit for the expansion of mass incarceration. Let me try and share my screen here with you all and see if it works. Yes, perfect. So on the Enlace website right now, we have a list of our 32 financial investment companies that own over 1 million shares of CCA and GEO stock combined. There's quite a few familiar companies on here. Wells Fargo is one of our favorites because they've extended nearly $1 billion in credit to CCA. And there's campaigns that have already started against the Million Shares Club. Here in Portland, Oregon, we've been pushing the city of Portland to divest from private prison industries. They don't own any CCA or GEO stock, but they do own Wells Fargo bonds. They own Bank of New York Mellon bonds. And we have successfully pushed our local committee to recommend that the city divest from these companies and stop buying their bonds. And that's also been tied to BDS work, pushing for the city to stop investing in buying bonds that are tied to companies that are engaged in human rights violations in Israel and Palestine. So there's a lot of interconnections that are possible with this kind of divestment work. And that work is also in tandem with groups that are doing anti-policing and anti-prison work on the grounds on all sectors, not just the corporate side. And I want to give a big shout out to work that we've been supporting, led by our steering committee member, African Black Coalition, and the University of California system. In December, the ABC and the Black Student Unions and African Student Unions and Million Hoodies, ACR, I see someone from UCR is on today. They pushed for the University of California to divest $25 million from holdings in CCA and GEO. And they are now pushing for the UC to divest its $425 million in holdings in Wells Fargo due to Wells Fargo's really cozy relationship with the private prison industry and its history of engaging in racist practices in all other ways. On that level, so there's a shout out to ABC putting Wells Fargo on notice. And here's a little quick pitch about our Portland work. Let me see, just really quickly so we can get over to our questions and answers. I want to point out that we've developed a lot of resources for taking the incredible resources on the Investigate tool to the next level with community, city, campus, pension, divestment campaigns. And if you go to the Enlace website, you can go to the Prison Divestment tab, the Resources tab, and that will take you to, we have fact sheets there. We have a city divestment toolkit that includes all of our work, including curricula and model divestment resolutions at the city level there. There's lots of infographics, for FOIA information, and then there is toolkits for students as well and a pension toolkit down below. So there are many ways to really start putting into practice the information that is so wonderfully presented on the Investigate webinar, and to do that in tandem with other organizing that is already happening in your community for a world free of cages. And I'll pass the ball to Dalit.
Thank you, Jamie. I didn't show you all the great slides. This is so sad. This is a good time for us to break and hear more from you guys. As you can see the chat down there, Lisa will collect questions. You just send your questions directly and personally to questions Elisa. Maybe I will find that slide that says that. We are so organized here, it's amazing. And let's see if we already have some questions, Elisa.
Hi, everyone. Yes, we have 2 questions. The first is from Charlie, who works with the Bay Area Black and Pink organization. And their question is, have you all tracked for-profit bail bondsmen and the insurance companies that underwrite them? That's the first question.
Caroline, do you want to answer that, or shall I?
Sure. I thought I grabbed the ball. I'm trying to grab the ball. Yes.
Yeah, you know.
I don't really need the ball, but anyway, yeah. So as Dalit mentioned, you know, this is still far from complete, and we did start looking at the for-profit bail industry, which, as I'm sure you know, but to maybe share with the other folks on the call, has really begun to assert itself on a lot of levels, particularly, at least in states like Arizona, on the state legislative level, to where they're lobbying very aggressively for their particular associates to, you know, be the ones that are allowed to operate and provide bail bonds. The company that I mentioned earlier in terms of immigration detention is a new animal where they're basically, you know, brokering bonds for immigrant detainees out from under the nose of ICE, which does provide its own bonds. But in some cases with Libre, they were actively discouraging people or failing to notify them that they could get a bond through immigration. So it's a really very important piece of the map, and we have begun, but we don't have it yet. It's definitely on our radar, and I think, you know, as we have the time and resources, if anybody is looking for volunteer opportunities, we always need help with doing this research because, again, the universe of this stuff is huge.
Okay, great. We have another question from Julie at the Webster University in St. Louis. And their question is just a clarification question about where one would find, for example, the annual reports. Dalit, you talked about the annual report that you downloaded and scanned. Where can someone, a student or someone who works at an organization find this kind of information?
This is actually a very, very excellent question. I've been, let me, blah, blah. I'm kind of into showing this out, that's it. So you see, for example, the Columbia University Prison Divestment campaign and so on. This is actually really always a challenge. I was cheating a little bit by showing you the scan on the annual report of TIAA-CRIF, which is on their website. It's a pension fund provider. It's very easy to get. But when you are a student, let's say in a private university, then the private university funds and how they are invested and where they are invested, by whom they are invested, this is not public information. And it is sometimes very, very hard to get that information. It requires its own mini campaign. Students should demand transparency and access to that kind of information. Sometimes the financial offices on campus will allow you very partial access, so they will let you ask a question. You can ask them, are you invested in CCA? Are you invested in GEO Group? Are you invested in G4S? And they will check it for you. That's kind of partial access. Sometimes there are resolutions that can be passed in different bodies within the campus, with the student senate, with the faculty senate, and so on, demanding that kind of transparency and actually making the university publish that information. And sometimes the lack of transparency itself can become a very important part of the divestment campaign. So the call for divestment coming from students or faculty or staff should focus on lack of transparency and asking the school to adopt a clear screen that screens out certain human rights violations or the prison industry as a whole, and asking them to report on it. So the transparency become a very big part of the campaign. In that case, then there isn't much to scan, but you can still use our tool, and not just as a scanner, but in order to find out information about some of these companies that can be very persuasive in the campaign, in getting people on board and getting people to support it, and showing university authorities how others have done so before. Another thing that I wanted to add about that is when you run such campaigns in a public institution, language is important. So we see all around the country prison divestment campaigns or prison divestment organizing that pops up in different schools and churches. And many times they focus only on GEO and CCA because these are the high-profile companies. And I think one of our goals with this research and this tool is to try to kind of expand it a little bit and help people think more widely, and adding in G4S for sure, but we also added Sodexo that operates prisons abroad, and a big company that does private probation, Providence, and we are going to expand it even further when we learn more about the way in which these companies respond to pressure, because it is important for us that it is not just about facility management. It really is about profiteering as a whole. Maybe, Jamie, maybe you want to say a word about how to obtain those files? Do you have something to add?
I think you covered it. A word from the Columbia Prison Divest campaign. One of the students there was able to get access to the private university's files by going into the administrative office and saying that she was doing a senior thesis project on the investments of the university. So there's a sneaky way of getting stuff that they wouldn't have given to the students if they'd known they were about to launch a campaign that was ultimately successful in getting the university to divest $10 million from direct holdings in CCA and G4S. So you can go the public channels, and you can also go the back channels.
Okay, we have another question from someone at the Black Alliance. We are looking, this is their statement, we are looking to make our 401k investment and would like to avoid groups to fund, have shares in CCA, GEO. Any recommendations about this?
This is actually helping us show another thing on the website, so I love that question, thank you. I will share my screen and go back to the website. We have a tab here on the top of the website which is called For Investors. Now, we can all think of ourselves as investors. We're invested in this society. But apart from that, we have a beginning of an attempt here to identify funds that are not implicated in any of our screens. So that includes the prison screen as well as the Israeli occupation and military producers. So because the American Friends Service Committee is a pacifist organization, our screens are strict like that. But we did try to put together a very preliminary list of mutual funds that are just out there, and we have screened. Now, what we have done, we've just used our screening tool on these mutual funds' latest annual reports. What it means is that we don't know if they are officially screening for these issues. We don't know if they still are free of this kind of investment, because the annual report is just giving you just a picture of what happened in the end of December of last year. And but it's a good first steps. And so we kind of suggest that when you do work with a specific financial manager or a specific mutual fund, you also let them know of your concerns. And this way you help create more of the demand in the industry for looking into such concerns. So you can say to your financial manager or the fund manager, I'm looking for a fund that is prison-free. And therefore, they know that more people are looking for that. And as usual with capitalism, when there is demand, there is supply. So more options will be provided. But this is our first attempt at creating such a list based on needs and questions that we keep getting.
I have another question from Christina. Does the tool cover investments that invest in others? For example, Wells Fargo investing in CCA and GEO, as was mentioned above.
So I will take this question again. We haven't uploaded to the tool yet the whole sector of financial services and investors. What we are planning to do is to do that in the next few weeks and to highlight some of the financial services providers to prisons, and that would include companies that provide them with financial services as banks and credit and so on. We will clearly link to the Million Shares Club, but we will not profile all of the companies that hold shares in CCA and GEO. This is not something that we will do. This is part of what Enlace is doing, and you heard Jamie discuss. Since one of the main divestment targets for Enlace is Wells Fargo, I will say that Wells Fargo will be covered and we will profile it, but as a company that provides a credit line and financial services to the prison companies.
This following question is directed to Caroline. Are taxpayers really paying for Libre GPS monitors? In Univision, they reported that it was actually the detainees, at least in immigration cases, who were paying for those fees. Can you please clarify, if possible?
That's right. Yeah. So there's kind of like these two-tiered systems in immigration. So ICE does have a contract with, for example, BI, which is a subsidiary now of GEO Group, right, to do ankle bracelet monitoring for people who are released as an alternative detention. And they also do, ICE does broker its own bail bonds to get out of detention. Libre, though, is a completely predatory company. And so that's right, it has no contracts with government at all. It brokers the bonds with the bond companies for the immigrants and charges the immigrants themselves for that service. So no, taxpayers are not paying for it. The immigrants are, which is again why it's a particularly predatory practice, because these are folks who are totally desperate to get out of detention and really are already economically disadvantaged.
This is a question from Bonnie Kernis. She says, thank you for all of this amazing tool. In New Jersey, as you noted, we are overwhelmed with CEC facilities. Aside from the important divestment piece, is there space on the website for the human rights issues as they come in from people living in those terrible places? Is there any role for activists inside those places?
Cool. Yeah. Hi, Bonnie. Yeah. We try to do just a very condensed version of the different profiles for the companies, and because CEC is a private company, it's not publicly traded. We don't have a full description up on the Investigate website, because again, this is a tool for investors to divest from the companies, and CEC is privately held. But that said, as part of the mapping, and now that CCA has bought several of those facilities, it's a good opportunity to go after CCA because of, as you mentioned, just the horrendous track record that CEC has. And there has been a lot, that's been written about this in various places. So what I would say is if you do know of folks that are looking to do local organizing and targeting CEC, then please connect us, because behind the tool that you see here is a ton of research of the articles about their various misdeeds, audits that we've collected that slam them, lawsuit information. There's a ton of data behind just what gets condensed into these little blurbs. So if you know of anybody that would benefit from that background info, we are more than happy to share. If people are looking to strategize, we would love to help out with that. I think it's a really good time to target CEC, because as I mentioned, I think they're the next one that's going to get gobbled up by CCA or GEO. And so if you can make that a liability for those companies, I think that that's a really good way to kind of shake things up. And since I'm already talking, I'm going to steal the ball and share something about this that I thought was really kind of interesting. So this is what you're seeing on the screen is GEO Group's most recent annual report. It's their CEC filing. It's not the annual report, where they have to, as Dalit said, they have to report to their investors what the risks are to their various investments, right? And this is a gold mine of information about how to mess with these companies. I really enjoy reading these. I highly recommend it. It gives you all kinds of ideas. And so, there's all the classic stuff about the market and blah, blah, blah. We are dependent on government appropriations, and oops, maybe if somebody else becomes president, they won't want to give us all these contracts anymore. And then the last one here, I think, is particularly telling. Public resistance to the use of public-private partnerships for correctional detention and community-based facilities could result in our inability to obtain new contracts or the loss of existing contracts, right? So, they actually go into the movement toward using public-private partnerships for such facilities has encountered resistance from groups such as labor unions, which believe that correctional detention and community-based facilities should only be operated by government agencies. Yeah, that's us, right? We are that resistance. So you can see that the kind of stuff that we're talking about doing here is actually having an impact, such that they had to report that to their investors. In addition, negative publicity about conditions, an escape, riot, or other disturbance at a facility operated under a public-private partnership may result in adverse publicity. And that might make it harder for us to maintain our contracts or get new contracts. So as Dalit mentioned, I just really want to underscore this kind of stuff really does make waves with these companies. When they get, in the paper with bad press about how they screwed up somewhere, or about how a community is resisting having them, operate a facility there, it really does have an impact. And, it goes on to talk about, more on this adverse publicity piece. So again, knowing sort of how these corporations think and what scares them really gives us an incredible arsenal, right, to use. So it's something that can be really useful. And again, if somebody was wanting to look at CEC and make a bunch of noise, it could be a really interesting tactic in New Jersey, just FYI.
This is a related question from Marlene.
Elisa, maybe I will interrupt for a moment. I want to make an announcement. So Diana has just texted me, and she's right. We have several people who are calling in. They are not on WebEx, several. So there is no way for them to use the chat or to see the chat or to chat in their questions. So I want to give them an opportunity to ask a question. If any of you who are just calling in on the phone, if any of you wants to ask a question, then there are two ways you can do that. You can send us an email, and I will check it right now. The email address would be investigate@afsc.org, org like organization, investigate@afsc.org. And another option is, if you wish, we will just try this for a minute. Diana can unmute all of you, and if any of you have a urgent question, maybe you can just interject and say, I'm here, I have a question. Let's see if any of you have an urgent question and you want to speak. You are now unmuted. Okay. Anybody on the phone? Okay, so we'll go ahead and mute you again. If you want to send us a question, send it to that email, investigate@afsc.org. Sorry, Elisa, for interrupting you.
No problem. So this is a question from Marlene, and this is related to what Caroline was speaking to. Thank you for this amazing conversation. I studied political economy of immigration enforcement detention since 1980 to the present, and in more detail in the state of New Jersey. Quickly, perhaps Caroline would be interested to know, or already knows, that CEC in Jersey is also extensively involved in Pennsylvania and Texas as well. And perhaps more, I have two questions. How do you distinguish between community correction companies, which have traditionally connected people to services, and this is a relatively newer interest by correction companies? Is it any better? And secondly, in your strategic corporate research, have you found any local jurisdictions that use government bonds to maintain existing prisons, jails, community corrections, and the services they have to pay for?
Whoa. Okay. What was the first one again?
How do you distinguish between community correction companies?
Right. So the term treatment industrial complex is one that we really coined to identify this trend of the for-profit prison companies, the ones traditionally just running and managing facilities, into this new quote-unquote alternatives market. So community corrections basically is both the front end alternatives to incarceration, so that would be probation services, drug treatment, day reporting centers, things like that, and then the back end, which is around reentry, so halfway houses, and then of course this proliferation of supervision and surveillance throughout all of that. And you're absolutely right. Traditionally, and in most places, you either have a network of state or federal government run facilities, particularly in terms of reentry programs, or you have nonprofits that are community-based. You've got your, St. Vincent de Paul's and your Salvation Army and Gospel Rescue Mission, some of the faith-based ones, and then other nonprofits that have been doing these programs forever. And one of the concerns, of course, is that if now all of a sudden there are these big lucrative government contracts available, that these larger players are going to be much more nimble and able to outcompete those locally based nonprofits for getting those contracts. Now, of course, the caveat here is that there's good, bad, and ugly across the spectrum, right? There are some nonprofits that are horrendous and have terrible track records, right? And there's really no regulation of these things in a lot of places. It's kind of piecemeal, at least in the state of Arizona, right? There's no state system for reentry. It's just like there are random contracts here and there, but the state really does not have a comprehensive service system for people getting out. But in a lot of places, there's really no monitoring or, standards or requirements or guidelines for that kind of stuff. And so now with this, this new influx of money, both through the Affordable Care Act, right, where you can actually, bill the feds for things like behavioral health services and drug treatment, and then also this movement away from mass incarceration, it's like the Wild West. And so it's really a mix, and we're trying to say, like, the best guidelines that we've been able to find are, the evidence-based practices that are coming out of, more kind of the social sciences and the research side that says, this is what a good program looks like. This is what actually works in terms of reducing recidivism, helping people overcome addiction and things like that. So we have to be very careful to say it's not a black and white, nonprofits are always great and for-profits are always bad. But we do want to say that in terms of the track record of many of these companies, inserting the profit motive into this sphere of community corrections tends to go awry. And that's generally because of the same kinds of patterns that you see in running prisons, right? It's all about cutting corners to save money so that they can make a profit off the top. And good quality services, whether it be in a prison or in a drug treatment center, are expensive. And so when you have that bottom line mentality and you're awarding your contracts to the lowest bidder, not the best provider, you're going to see the same kinds of patterns. That was a very long-winded answer to your question. I hope I answered it. And then the second one was about, help me out, Elisa. Something bonds, government bonds?
Yeah, so in your strategic corporate research, how have you found any local jurisdictions that use government bonds to maintain existing prisons, jails, community corrections?
Yeah, it's really falling out of favor. And that's it's really one of the advantages that the for-profit industry offers to states and local jurisdictions, is that it's very hard to pass a bond, to get voters to say, yes, we want to pay for maintaining this prison or building a new prison. But CCA can come in and throw up a prison overnight because they have gobs of capital to invest in that. And that's unfortunately what makes that very attractive to local jurisdictions and states. Certainly in Arizona, that's been a big problem, is that, we're one of the states that has continued to expand while other states have been downsizing prisons. And that's mostly through the use of for-profit companies because they can do it without a bond. So it really is a difficult field when you kind of have these corporations being able to circumvent the kinds of processes that used to check the growth, basically, of these kinds of facilities.
Okay, and we have one final question here from Bonnie. We are receiving many requests from prisoners concerning email through JPay. Is there information on this process and profiteering on the site that we can share inside?
That's definitely one of the ones that I want to add to the screen, and it's one of the newer developments, and I would predict it's going to be huge. So what she's referring to is that some of these companies that have been providing things like, the prison banking services, and also some of the commissary providers, right? So the commissary is where you buy like your toothbrush and your toothpaste and your can of tuna and stuff like that from the prison store. That's an exclusive contract. I think one of the new kind of fields for profiteering is this kind of technology and content arena. So one is finding secure ways for incarcerated people to use email, right? Because they're banned from using the internet in most facilities for fairly obvious reasons. But I think a lot of these corporations are now looking at ways to market that kind of technology. Another big one is stuff like downloading music and ebooks and entertainment products, right? You know, basically you're kind of like Amazon for incarcerated people. That is, of course, to them, a tremendous source of potential profits. And it's really only just popping up kind of on my radar. But I do, it's definitely one of the ones that I want to start looking into. And if folks have information about that, like Bonnie, whatever you've got, please, you know, scan those letters, send them to me. If folks have other ideas, you know, maybe we can talk about like a feedback loop at the end of the call for ways that we can continue to share some of this information, because again, it is a burgeoning industry. Like I've been doing this for 20 years, and I was shocked when we started doing this research at the incredible breadth of profiteering here, and we've really just scratched the surface.
I just want to make a quick comment that we will be sending out an evaluation form that will ask folks to offer us feedback on the webinar, as well as feedback on the website, any comments or questions, potentially any resources that they'd like to share. We'll have that as well.
Okay, so if we have no more questions, I would still send you my request to send us information and remarks and whatever you can think of would be useful. I've sent people our email address, investigate@afsc.org. Please check out the website, play with it, go into different crevices of it, try it on, and I hope you will use it to take on these corporations. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation.
Thanks, y'all.